Lee, my friend, thank you so much for coming on the Stop Chasing Pain podcast. This is a great day.
Thank you. Yeah, man, I appreciate you having me on. We've known each other a while now, and anytime you get an opportunity to hang out with you, it's awesome.
Absolutely. I agree. Well, for those that have followed me for any period of time, you know how important Lee Burton is and Gray Cook, another great fan. They were transformational in changing my entire journey into my development as a person, definitely as a chiropractor and a healthcare provider. And honestly, they were the two that exposed me to the fundamental role that movement plays in human life, but also performance, of course, but in chronic pain, because I was struggling so much to help myself and help all of my clients. And when I found the movement one, it was like finding the holy grail, for instance. And you're one of the founders of the FMS, the Functional Movement Screen, which I'm wearing a shirt on right now.
Representing today, man. That's awesome.
Represent. Absolutely. I love the swag. I wear it all the time. It's really funny because when I go to the gym and I train, personal trainers come up to me because they recognize the FMS.
Oh, wow.
Because they see it, they've learned it, and they say, "Oh man, you do this, you know this," and then I drop the, "Oh yeah, they're good friends of mine," like laying it down.
Now it's the opposite. Now it's the opposite, Perry. You become so popular now that I like to tell people I know you. I dropped the Dr. Perry Nicholson, the lymph doc words every time I can.
Well, hopefully they don't run the other way. Oh, that guy?
No, it's all good.
So let's start from the beginning for people that are listening that might not be familiar with what I'm talking about. I could have just said Martian to you, and they're not sure about FMS or functional movement screen, and start talking there, but also talk about how you look at movement. I mean, why is this such a pivotal thing in what you've created and what you do?
Yeah, to kind of give you the real brief history of FMS. And when you say FMS, we try to make it about a system, more of a systematic approach of how you look at the body and how the body moves and works, and everything is connected. And, I look back at my career, if you get back for where I went to graduate school, my background, sports medicine, strength conditioning, Gray Cook and myself, who founded the organization 25 years ago, Perry, it's been crazy now, it's been that long, but back in the late 1990s, my first, kind of the story I like to tell is my first kind of light bulb moment working with Gray is, I went into an exam room with Gray literally the first day on the job, and he asked me to evaluate a basketball player's ankle. And I looked at his ankle, do the normal stuff any young, clinician would do. I evaluated his ankle, did some testing, and I came out, presented that case to Gray, and Gray said, okay. And Gray goes back in, and Gray proceeds to have him touch his toes, rotate, stand on one foot, doing all these just movements, and I thought it was random movements. Why is he rotating? Like literally rotate to turn to see what he can see behind him. Look up at the sky. Can you look, how far can you bend backwards? How far can you bend your toes? So we walk out of the room, and I'm like, well, what in the world? This kid's got an ankle sprain and he's got him doing all these things. So I, literally walk out of the room, and Gray and I, for most people don't realize, grew up together. Like we've known each other forever. His father was a minister in our church growing up. So we've known each other. So we have a rapport. He's been my, mentor for all these years. We've always had a good rapport. So Gray says, what do you think? And I literally look at him and say, Gray, I don't know what the hell you just did. I don't know what, his kid's got an ankle sprain, right? And, so he's got an ankle sprain, and Gray, you're looking at him touch his toes, bend backwards, rotate. And this is what Gray said to me, which is which is really where I was like, all right, I got to learn what this guy's thinking. He says, well, we're going to work on the ankle. Everything you said do, we'll do it. We got to get his ankle strong. Got it. He goes, but this kid's got chronic ankle sprains. And what we have to figure out is his ankle continuing to get injured because he has a problem somewhere else in the body? Maybe his hips don't work right. Maybe his back is, doesn't have a lot of mobility in it. So we got to just check some other areas to see if that may be leading to him to continue to sprain his ankles. Or is it, and most likely the ankle injury is causing problems somewhere else in the body. So if this kid's going to rehab his ankle, he's going to have, limp around. He's going to create some problem in his hips, his back. So let's just make sure we're tackling all of that. And he said, here's the other profound. He goes, Lee, I don't know which one it is. I don't know if there's a problem somewhere else causing an ankle problem or if the ankle is causing something else. But either way, let's attack the entire body. So it was that holistic approach in the body that was the kind of the light bulb moment. And we start talking about movement, we got to look at the whole, because the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, right? So it's really looking at the whole and how everything works together. So if one link in the chain is disrupted, it's going to make the entire chain weaker, and it's going to make other links in the chain work harder. And that's what resonated. And that's really what started our journey into movement, is thinking, okay, we need to look at the entire body when someone's injured. But at the same time, I was actually working at high school, doing high school outreach, going out to the high schools. And as the athletic trainer, I was in charge of physicals, and all these kids. And here's another story I like to tell, Perry, is, I was seeing a lot of kids at the high school come to see me on Tuesday. So a lot of these athletes would come in on Tuesday, and on Tuesday, they would come in with knee pain, shoulder pain. And I'm like, all right, why, what is going on Tuesday? Why are these kids coming in Tuesday? Well, lo and behold, I started realizing that a lot of these high school football players at this school that I was working at was a very big time high school football place. They were lifting on Monday. So they were lifting heavy on Monday. And because most of these kids didn't know how to lift right, they were doing bench, clean, squat, the traditional stuff. They were coming in with just these aches and pains because they were putting too much stress on the joints because they were not lifting appropriately. So we started thinking, Gray and I and the guys at the clinic started thinking, how can we take Gray's kind of movement approach, touch your toes, rotate, this holistic approach, and implement it as part of the pre-participation physicals to see if we can identify some of these problems before they turn into bigger problems. So kind of wrap this little journey up is, so we started doing this as part of the pre-participation physical to say, hey, if you can't squat, if you can't do a push-up, then there's certain exercises that you should avoid in the weight room. Like if you can't squat with your body weight, Perry, you probably shouldn't load a bunch of weight on your back to squat. If you can't do a push-up, maybe you shouldn't be doing a bench press. And if you don't have good upper body mobility, overhead pressing is probably not the best thing. So it was that approach that we started out with, that we started implementing, and it gained some traction. We started getting requests to do more within the military. Was one of the first groups where and it's more the proactive approach of things than it is anything else. Now, from that, Perry, it kind of morphed into this whole corrective exercise thing. But what I try to tell people, if you go back to why we created it to avoid exercises. Which exercises should I not be doing? And everybody wants to talk about how to fix stuff. And it's like, all right, we know we need to fix it, but the first thing we need to do is remove what's causing the problem.
I love that. Thank you so much for the summary on that. It's so exciting. And there's so many things that you said there that stand out to me is is it the chicken or the egg? And the answer is yes. It's probably exactly a little bit of both. So how about we just take care of both? It's just realizing that you had an egg somewhere, right? It's finding it. And that's what I love about your work is that you're trying to be proactive and looking for things that might be a potential problem for that person. And it's kind of like the military where they teach situational awareness. Like it's better to avoid a fight if you know the signals so you don't have to even get into one, right? Notice the potential threats, right?
Yep. You're always, and that's the thing, assessing, in essence, assessing risk.
Yes.
Every day we get up, we're assessing risk to a degree. When you walk outside, you're looking around. Before you cross the street, you're assessing your risk. Now you can choose to walk across the street when it says don't walk, but your risk is higher. And really what we're all trying to do is assess risk. And Perry, that's what you and I are doing as clinicians is okay, what's the risk of this individual? If they're already injured, well, their risk is already at a certain point. We're just trying to figure out where is that, as you said, threat coming next time, because they've already elevated it. We just got to figure out let's make sure we can find out so the next domino doesn't fall.
Yeah, I love that because you don't know what you don't know if you don't have something where you could even look for it. And that was one of the pivotal movements for me, the pun intended, is that I was as a chiropractor, but you could probably put those under the guise of most healthcare providers that were typically trained to you know look where it hurts and treat where it hurts, and then hope for the best and send you on your way. Sometimes that works out. Most of the time, it doesn't. Hence the word chronic pain. But I was doing like you. I was just doing all of my assessments on a region, but I was doing everything on a table. Like the person was in an unnatural environment as to where they live, unloaded, hanging out on a table. And I couldn't see how it related to anything else. And that's one of the things that we've talked about in the past that frustrated me of like, why in the hell does this stuff keep coming back when people come to see me 3 times a week for a freaking month? And I realized that, okay, holy cow, they got to stand up and move. So maybe I could even see if they can stand. So one of my favorite assessments is one you mentioned before. It's just like, okay, can you even stand on one leg for at least 20 seconds on your own? And oh my God, so many people cannot do that.
That's right. I did I just did a lecture. I did a presentation for a group of firefighters, and they are the safety and health firefighters. And what you touched on, what resonated with me when you said that, when I had this group of firefighters, people in the audience, I did that. I said, hey, everybody stand up and just stand on one foot. Stand on your right foot, stand on your left foot. And so many of those people, as you said, had problems doing that. Now, these aren't injured individuals. These are healthy firefighters, or quote unquote healthy firefighters. But the amount of people that had difficulty doing that, you should be able to stand on one foot for 15, 20 seconds without a problem. But the amount of people that couldn't. But the thing is, how many of those people thought they could, didn't even
Right.
think that was a big deal. So that awareness, the one thing that we're trying to really gravitate to, that I think some of the ways that you look at the body and we look at the body is, it's you're creating this awareness that people know their back hurts, right?
Mm.
People know I got to go search the internet. I got to do something to help my back pain. But what they don't think about is what's causing that. And a lot of times what's causing that somewhere else. And that's why what you do is so important. It's somewhere else is creating this problem. And if we can get people, those group of firefighters, soon as I had them do that early on, that, Perry, you want to get people to lean into your lecture, you got to do something that makes it personal. And soon as I had half the room couldn't stand on one foot, they're like, oh, I didn't think that was a big deal. And then I go into, you can't stand on one foot. That's an injury risk factor. You're at more, the people that could not stand on their foot are more at risk for the people that could. And you got 70% of the people in the room couldn't stand on one foot. So 70% of the people had a higher risk. And then they lean in because they create awareness. And it's not that balance problem you just talked about is going to cause back pain. Who knows? But it's something along the line is going to be a problem.
Yeah, because you should be able to do it.
Right.
And then because you should be able to do it, your body's going to try to compensate any way it can to compensate, since the word, for that. And it's probably going to show up somewhere later, right?
Yeah.
And
I mean, we've even got data now, Perry, that says if you've got a lack of ankle mobility, it relates to your grip and shoulder mobility. Now, I'm not going to sit there and try to explain that. I could throw out some ideas, but it doesn't mean it's a relationship, but it's not cause. Like, I'm not going to say a lack of ankle mobility is causing your shoulder mobility. And grip strength. So shoulder mobility relates to grip strength. So if you got poor shoulder mobility, your grip strength's down. You have poor ankle mobility, your grip strength is down. Now, without trying to dissect that all up, in my opinion, Perry, what that tells me is you're probably just not active, because the people who have poor grip probably aren't using their grip, probably aren't active. The people who aren't active probably aren't doing a lot with their upper body mobility, and probably aren't doing a lot with their lower body mobility. Because if you're not using a lack of ankle mobility tells me somebody's probably not doing a lot of deep squatting other than getting up and out of a chair, and probably aren't doing a lot of things that require them to move their hips when they're walking. They're not doing, their strides aren't very long. They're probably not running. All that requires ankle mobility. So it's tough. I mean, it's not as simple as, hey, let me go work on your ankle. Let me go work on your shoulder. Let me go work on your back. That's why I think your your mantra of stop chasing pain is just so true and so on so many levels.
Well, thank you, but I'll give the credit to you guys because that's where I got the name from. And I asked permission for it, but it was almost like, I do it and then ask for forgiveness later.
That's
So
right.
yeah. So, but yeah, and even something about that, like the ankle mobility. Let me talk about that for a second. So, I mean, honestly, how many people do you come across that have poor ankle mobility?
Oh, I'd say right now, easy 30-40%, maybe more.
Big time, right? A lot,
Big
but
time.
they usually probably didn't even know that they had the poor ankle. So how do you assess for something like that for people so that they get it? Like, is that something you can see through, part of the movements that you put people through? Of if they can't do a squat, for instance, that might be a reason why. So we can go look at that further.
Yeah, yeah. And I think kind of getting back to how we created our system and probably quite honestly, what drew you to it. Shoot, I got this do not disturb on it. It's still good. So yeah, I think when we start talking about how we look at the movement and probably what drew you to what we do, Perry, is we don't just some random look at all these random movements. And that's what I thought Gray was doing early on. It's a decision
Right.
tree. So for example, if you can't squat, and I mean, and the listeners right now could stand up and just, put their arms above their head and see if they can squat down, or not even put their arms above their head, put their arms in front and see, can they squat down low? And if you can't squat and get your, kind of your butt below your knees, then you're lacking some mobility. Now you're lacking mobility in your hips, potentially in your knees, potentially, or in your ankles, potentially. I don't know which one, but I know there's a lack of mobility somewhere. So another test we would do like a forward reach test. How far can you reach forward? So if you go 2 foot lengths away from the wall, can you touch the wall with your foot at where the wall meets the floor? 2 simple tests. Can you squat? Don't even worry about crazy overhead and all this. Hey, can you just stand up and squat down and get your butt below your knees? If you can't, probably got a mobility problem. The next test then will confirm if it's an ankle or not. Because if I get 2 foot lengths away from the wall and I can't touch the wall and I can't squat, tells me it's a good chance it could be a ankle mobility problem because I'm not stressing your hip or your knee that much in that position. So every one of our little movements, if I can't do this, then I'm going to go play off of the next one, which is kind of intentional redundancy. So I'm going to play the decision tree out. And I think that's what makes a good assessment or a good screen is where I want to confirm. I want to get to the bottom to say, hey, I've got a good chance it may be a ankle mobility problem or a hip mobility problem, because after I go through my assessment, then I can pinpoint, say, okay, I know it's that, here's what we need to do about it. And if it's this hip mobility or ankle mobility in this case problem, it's going to create problems everywhere else. It's going to impact my squatting, my lunging, my stepping, my balance.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And I love how you mentioned, it's not just picking, I mean, there's endless amount of movements that you could look for on something, right? So the first thing is just the awareness that, hey, why don't you just watch somebody move any way you want first? So start there. And then you guys created a system of at least, here's what I like, at least a starting point. You're not saying it is the best and only way. It's just a place to start. So why did you choose the movements that you did choose out of all of those? Right? How much time did that
That's
take?
the best question, Perry. Why did he even choose these things?
Yeah, well, I'm sure there's a reason for it because you can see, well, we got to start somewhere, first of all. But can you go over what the movements are that you found the ones that you like to focus on first, and maybe the rationale of why you did?
Yeah, that's a great starting point because we have two things that we do. We do a screen. I'll start here. We do a screen, and a screen is exactly that. It is a filter. Anytime you're doing a screen on someone, like if you go into the doctor, the first thing they're going to do is they're going to do screens. They're going to check your height. They're going to check your weight. They're just going to screen the basics and see if those screens, if anything gets triggered. They're going to ask you some questions. So triggering you. So that screen is first, but we do the screen on people who are currently not in pain or don't realize they're in pain. Then we have our assessment, and our assessment is much more driving down to create what we call a movement diagnosis. So the screen is just designed to say, hey, can you do these things or not? And does it hurt? And we've got basic movements in each one of them, but they're kind of for different reasons. So the screen that we do, and a lot of the movements carry over. So the screen that we do is kind of what people know us for, especially in the fitness world. We do what we call a functional movement screen, and we do 7 tests. And we look at squatting, lunging. We do what we call a hurdle step, which is a balance test. And those 3 are what we call our functional test. Because if you think about it, Perry, everything you do throughout the day is off of one of those 3 foot positions. You're either in a symmetrical stance where you're going to squat down to sit, you're going to squat down to go to the bathroom, you're going to squat down to pick up an object. So that's one pattern. We knew we had to look at that pattern because that's a squat, that's a fundamental pattern. That goes back to Olympic lifting. It goes back to even how some of the early military physicals were done. They looked at a squat. So the next one is a lunge. In a lunge, without saying lunge, it's just split stance. It's literally 1 foot in front of the other, both feet planted. Well, that's walking. You got 1 foot, you got 1 hip flexed, 1 hip extended. So let's put you in a split stance position and see how well you can tolerate a split stance position. How well can you tolerate a squat? And then the hurdle step is single leg stance. How well can you tolerate, we started off talking about balance. How well can you tolerate balance? And all of these movements, those top 3 are everything. It's like the entire body. Like you're using kind of all the body to do those. If you've got a lack of shoulder mobility in those if you got a lack of shoulder mobility, it will impact those tests, those positions I just told you about. If you got a problem with shoulder mobility, it's going to impact your ability to do a lunge or a split stance. You got a lack of shoulder mobility, it's going to impact your ability to squat. So we know shoulder mobility because it impacts that. So what we break them down. So those top 3 are functional. Then we break them down to shoulder mobility, where we look at your upper body mobility. How can you basically touch your fingers on your back? That's shoulder mobility. And that comes, we knew we need to look at upper body mobility because how it impacts movement. So we took what's right out of an orthopedic textbook and called an aptly scratch test. And it's basically reaching behind your back and over your head. How far can you touch on your back? And we just said, let's just do both arms together. That's that. Then we looked at a leg raise, and the leg raise has been around. It's almost taught in every orthopedic course. How, can you stand, lay on your back and raise your leg up? Well, instead of doing it passively, we did it active because, that's active. And that kind of narrows down our hip mobility in our posterior chain, because we needed to look at that because we know hip mobility and a lack of your posterior chain flexibility impacts what? Your squat, your lunge, your hurdle step. And then we looked at 2 other tests in the screen. We looked at your ability to do a push-up, not for strength, even though strength's part of it, but can you control your spine when you're trying to load your upper body? So picture yourself taking a suitcase and putting it in your closet on the top shelf. When you put that suitcase on the top shelf and you start pushing it backwards, well, if it's heavy, as soon as you start pushing, you may have a tendency to hyperextend or go into extension. And what you should do is engage your core so you don't. So it's more of a trying to see if you can not extend your spine when you have an upper body force. That's a push-up. And that's what you want to see. If somebody's doing a poor push-up, you'll see them hyperextending, their back will sway, and that's not good. And then we did a crawling test. And the crawling test, can you control your spine when we put you in kind of an unstable environment? So the push-up we look at is a very, what we call high threshold, kind of grunting. That's power. And so that's kind of fundamentals of power, whereas the other one is like just a more fundamental way to check your balance. So we looked at all those, and where we started, honestly, with our movement patterns is going back to growth and development. So we knew we needed, so we went back and looked at growth and development, and we started seeing how did we learn to move, and we started seeing some common patterns. You see a squat pattern in kids, you see a lunge, rolling, you see quadruped. So we started using that as our thing, and then we looked at, okay, again, remember why we created the screen. When people go into the weight room, what are the common lifts they're going to do? And let's compare them to that. Okay, where's something we could look at a push-up, or excuse me, a bench press? How can we determine if somebody's ready to do a bench press? Well, push-up. Make sure you got good core control. So we started connecting growth and development with what people do in the weight room, and we just started to say, what can people look at there? So that's where we came up with the screen. And then, a lot of that was built off of, and I'll pause here in a second, Perry. a lot of that was built off of kind of what Gray was doing also with that assessment. I saw the first day on the job was touch your toes. That's posterior chain flexibility. Bend your back. That's full extension in your body. Rotation. Well, you need to look at rotation to stand and rotate. And we looked at squatting. We looked at balance. We looked at upper body mobility. So, we look at the big patterns: squatting, stepping, lunging, rotating, touching your toes. Then we break those down as like that decision tree I mentioned ago to say, okay, if I can't squat, there's a lot of reasons why I can't squat. The next thing I want to know is my hip mobility driving it? Is my ankle mobility driving it? Is my shoulder mobility driving it? Because the most common question I've got over the years, Perry, is, hey, Lee, I can't squat. How do I fix it? And my next question is, well, what's your shoulder mobility like? What's your hip mobility like? Well, I don't know what my shoulder mobility is like. Well, start there.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that was awesome. Thanks for that wonderful summary there. I mean, there's so many wonderful things. I remember when I got my first FMS screen done by Gray, when I came down to meet you guys for the first time years ago. And I was like, oh my God, I did horrific. Like, I don't think I passed one of them. It could have been that I was just nervous that one of the creators was doing it for me. So I had probably a little stage fright, but yeah, that's so great that you mentioned those things. I'm curious. I mean, I know the answers to these, but I'm going to ask you because I want the audience to know. Is there one that I know you mentioned the 7. Was that the order that you do it in? Do you start with the squat? Is the one that you prefer to start with, and why?
Yeah, the reason we start with the squat, not for the only reason we're standing, is we start standing because, then we get you on the floor because we do a leg raise, push up, and we do that crawling test I mentioned. Those tests are on the ground. So we just start standing. And it really, honestly, Perry, depends on the population. If I'm working with an active population, I'll start with a squat and kind of work my way down, because the squatting and those standing tests are the most difficult tests. And they're difficult for the reason. I mean, you're telling me I'm doing those tests because you're saying, hey, I want to work out. I want you to give me a workout, Lee, and I want to get after it. All right, let's start at the difficult place and move from there. If you've got a deconditioned person, maybe an older individual or an overweight individual who's looking to start working out, I may start with shoulder mobility. I may start with a leg raise. I don't want to start them with the hardest thing, knowing they're not going to do well, knowing they're already intimidated coming into a gym because they're not comfortable. So I'll start them on the easy side and build them up.
Great. So it's the variety, variation, variability you need when you need it based on the person that you're working with. It's just you need to understand the thinking process of what you're looking for.
That's basically right. That's right. It's much more to it. Again, it's a decision tree. It's logic. It's a flow chart. It's not just these random tests thrown together to say, okay, I got through all the tests. What we try to teach you is you do the test, then you sit back and look at it, just like, you do the same thing, Perry. You look at all the data and say, okay, because this person has this, now that impacts this. And because it impacts this, it's probably ankle mobility. It's probably shoulder mobility. Yeah. And that's kind of what we do.
And when you see it enough, when you're in the arena long enough, you start to figure it out, even to see it ahead of time when you do. And I just want to thank you very much for what you mentioned before about realizing who you're working with and the emotions of that person, because they're intimidated, which is going to influence how they move or their pain. And if you know they're going to struggle with it, don't put them more in the spotlight for that. So yeah, that comes with experience and time too. I want to cycle back to something that you mentioned before, and I'm gonna, hopefully I phrase this the right way. I've heard this, people ask it. I would say, are you having a movement problem because you're in pain? Or is there a movement problem is why you have pain, right? So when pain is on board with something ahead of time, for instance, that they've got something, or you find something that hurts during the movement screen that they did not expect to hurt, where does that take you? What does that tell you?
Yeah, pain, shoot, Perry, this too. How many people are in pain right now that walk into a gym that want to start working out? Obviously they go in the clinical setting, or they're coming to see you, you're an expert. So they come to see you, they're already in pain. So pain impacts everything, and one thing people, the big, I'll say misconception, maybe not for your audience, but those group of firefighters that I saw this weekend, I'll give you a stat. Actually, we were very fortunate to work with an electrical company, a bunch of linemen, and these linemen are the ones that climb the poles, kind of the Navy SEALs of electrical companies, right? These are badass guys.
Yeah.
And so we did a survey, we were working with them, we realized 80% at the end of the day, 80% felt that by the end of their workday, pain is normal. Like, that's just the way it is. And so many people walk around thinking, yeah, I'm old, you know, my knee hurts. That's just the way it is. That's not the way it should be, right? Pain is there in a good way, telling you something is wrong. And that's your brain's way of saying, Lee, if you don't do something about this, you're going to blow a gasket somewhere. Something is going to break. So in a good way, pain is telling you something is wrong. We got to figure it out. And what that does to the rest of the body, it alters your entire proprioceptive neuromuscular system. So the brain, it's doing its job by basically trying to reallocate certain things, whether that's movement, whether it's a lot of what you talk about, blood flow, lymph, reallocate to both heal the body and protect the body. Now, while it's trying to protect that area of the body and heal it, you're still going about your day trying to, you know, I talk about those linemen, they're still climbing the pole. Yeah, my back hurts, but I'm still going to climb the pole, do it all. So now they are actually stressing another area of the body that's not hurt. So because the brain is shutting down your ability to use that one area, that's what it's designed to do. You're now, is what you just said, compensating somewhere else. So I may compensate because my back hurts using my shoulders more. You may compensate using your knees more because your back's hurt, because you got to bend down, you got to do this and get a twist. Well, lo and behold, I'm going to end up blowing out my shoulder. You may end up blowing out your knee. Ultimately, it may have been the back that's leading that. And all the while, that pain is what's driving it. So getting back to your direct question, kind of the answer is, does pain drive poor movement, or does poor movement drive pain? And the answer is yes. The answer is in either scenario, if you got pain that we've got to figure out what's causing it. But that pain is ultimately going to lead to something else going wrong. And that's what it's designed to do. The difficulty is each person will compensate or react a little different based off that pain. And that goes into everything. The body's just going to figure out, because what's our brain always trying to do, Perry? Trying to create homeostasis, trying to find the path of least resistance to create homeostasis. So it's going to do whatever it has to do that. And sometimes over time, if you don't address it, it's going to become a bigger problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. And I love the yes answer. That's perfect. I use that all the time.
Yeah, you know, you say
that?
it, I say
Yes.
it. I hate to say it, but that a lot of times it's like, yeah, that you're right. It could be either one.
Yeah. So it doesn't have to be that difficult, right?
That's right.
That's what I love about the screen. First of all, I love the word screen on there to find some issues that might be underlying that someone is not even aware of. And you know, I really discovered for myself when I started to do this, I was thinking, okay, just because this person looks really fit and athletic, or two, you know, they're in a place where they're kind of like at the top of their game, if you will, whatever that might be. It's a wake-up call for them on just, I don't like to use the word poorly, honestly, but just how the screen is difficult for them. You know, it's almost like this light bulb goes off, and that's the catalyst for change for most people. It's just that's the aha moment.
That's right. That's the awareness. And, you know, kind of go back to that awareness piece. That's one thing that I think, you know, that I've gotten feedback from professionals using the screen as a tool. When they put somebody through it who thinks, you're just going to give me these little body weight things, get this little kit here, you're making me step over it. Those are easy. And they realize, oh my God, I can't do it. Or better awareness is when they can do it on one side, but can't on the other, you know? And I think that's where that awareness comes in, where people are like, oh my God. And then, to be honest, that's the selling point. That's where it's, hey, lean in, because, you know, the other thing is, it's just a snapshot of where you are. And I think you made a good point of, I'm not going to tell somebody, okay, wow, your movements are terrible. No, hey, here's where you are today. We just got to get it back.
Yeah,
it's just that snapshot in time, and that awareness. I don't think we can, you know, that's really what you're getting to, you know, creating that awareness in individuals in whatever you're trying to get them to. You know, what probably the best group is Alcoholics Anonymous. The first thing you got to realize, you got a problem, and it's that awareness of the problem. And it's something called self-determination theory, that's been looked at as far as creating self-assessments, things you can do on your own. And that's a lot of what you do, Perry, following some of your stuff. You're just creating ways that a person can do something themselves and, get some improvement, or maybe it doesn't. And maybe hey, that just didn't work. Okay, great. You know something. Whether it works or whether it doesn't work still tells you a lot if you're in this world that we're in on what you need to do next. Okay, that didn't work. I'm not worried about that, but that tells me something about it.
Yeah, which is perfect, man, because that's going to segue into my next question. So this one I know can go into the quicksand, but it's something you touched on before about, okay, people go through the movement screen and they typically get a score that's on there. That people learn more about how to do that when they take the postal movement screen course. That's a hint, by the way, that you should. And then they go, okay, how can I fix it? How can you fix me? Give me the corrective exercises that are going to fix this.
Yeah, I mean, like I said,
they want okay, tell me exactly this, and then if that doesn't work, they say, well, your system doesn't work.
Yep, and unfortunately, there is, and I think that's one reason we've kind of stood the test of time. Is I'm not gonna, and I think Barry, again, what probably drew you to us. I'm not going to tell you how to treat your patient. I'm not going to tell you how to train your client, because I don't know much about your client. I don't know anything about your patient. What I do know is we have a pretty good set of checks and balances and that's our assessment, that's our test, and that's our screen. So if you tell me, again, a common problem, Lee, I've got ankle mobility. I'm going to say, here are some exercises that we have seen that will work to improve ankle mobility. Now, to your direct question, well, I did them, Lee, but they didn't work. Well, okay, now you need to start thinking, okay, why didn't they work? Are they doing, first thing I said when I started my journey is you have to remove what's causing the problem. If a person has a lack of ankle mobility and they're still running 10 miles a day, or they're still doing X, Y, or Z, or they're still training, or they're still doing something, then you're not the exercises may not work, which is part of the conversation. So I can help somebody's upper body mobility, but if they go to the office and sit in the front of the computer at their desk hunched over 8 hours a day, well, that mobility only works so much. And if they're not sleeping and they're under a lot of stress and they're, not drinking enough water, then your exercises are not going to be as impactful as they would if you address a lot of the behaviors, a lot of the lifestyle. So, I mean, that's what we're looking at now more than ever is everything impacts movement and movement impacts everything. So it's, if you're not sleeping and you're not drinking fluids well and you're not eating right, then the exercise workout, it will work, but it's not going to work as well. And certain exercises that may work on me may not work on you. Now here's the positive part of that. That's why we go back and do a good assessment to set the baseline. If you do a good assessment to set the baseline, I can determine whether this exercise is working or not. So if I check your ankle mobility today and it's poor, and I give you a set of exercises today and they work because I know I can go back and recheck it, then I'm on the right track. But if I check your ankle mobility today, Perry, and it doesn't work, then you know what I got to do? I got to change something up. And I think that's part of the problem in our profession is people just assume because they heard you say it or me say it, hey, this is great for ankle mobility. Well, it is, but if it's not, change it up. If you're going to fail fast. And that's not my quote. That's a Phil Knight quote. If you're going to fail fast. So you can pivot and do something different because the human body is such a unique and awesome thing that it takes everything in. It takes everything in you're doing throughout the day, throughout your environment, and it gets impacted by that. And just because I got a good solution for ankle mobility, you may go out and go to a party and everybody's going to go to Christmas parties this week and drink and dance and you slip, you fall, you sprain your ankle. Well, your ankle mobility is gone.
Yeah.
So, and that's just life happens.
I love that. What was that quote from Knight? Fail
fast.
Fail. I love that. That's similar to a quote. I don't know if I'm going to get it right, but I saw it in martial arts somewhere. There's the faster you make mistakes, the quicker you'll learn than everyone else, because you're going to figure out what it wasn't, each time. And like, here's a novel idea. Why don't you pick a different exercise? Because maybe it's what that person needs, or I want to cycle back to this, is that maybe that is what the person needed, but in this particular moment, it's not going to work for them because of something that happened to them that day or the day before. Can you talk a little bit about that? We did when I was recently on your podcast. You guys are going after some of these low hanging fruits of lifestyle habits like hydration, sleep, and breathing.
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing we've seen over the years, looking at a lot of the research is, we got this problem right now with musculoskeletal health, where people are just coming in with back pain, shoulder pain. They got all these issues, running around. 80% of those linemen think pain is normal. And we've been talking about movement for 20 some years, but what we started seeing, there's so many other things that impact movement. I mean, we know now that if you have poor breathing, and we do a breathing screen, so we screen your breathing. If you have poor breathing, your movements are going to be poor. If your movements are poor, you're going to have poor breathing. Same thing as pain. I don't know which one is the driver, but now I know. So when I go prescribe an exercise, I may want it to be more breathing focused. So we look at breathing, we look at hydration, we're looking at a lot of these lifestyle factors, because it's a chicken and egg again, Perry. The lifestyle is going to impact the movements, but the movements will impact the lifestyle. And we've got to almost figure out which one is the underlying driver. That's kind of what we're starting to think about now is, okay, you've got problems with your movements. Well, we're going to work on that, but let's also look at your lifestyle. And I like to tell this story also is, if you're going through, for example, I used to work at a university, a small university, and all these kids for years would show up in August. And the first week into it, Perry, all these kids would, not all, obviously not all, but a lot of percent of them would come in with the groin strains, hip flexor strains, not the acute problems. Most of them were coming in, hamstrings are sore, just muscle strains. And so I would do what I do is stretch them out, give them ice, and do all the stuff. And this is, 10 years ago. And it was just clockwork every year. I could almost say, all right, the first week, we're going to be wrapping ankle, we're going to be wrapping ace wraps, we're going to be wrapping their hips, and we, icing down these kids. And I never thought, it never occurred to me until like the last few years, we started looking at this holistic approach. Well, these freshmen coming in are moving away from their friends, their family, their significant others. They're getting thrown into an environment that's totally different. And then on top of that, they're not eating right. They're new in college. They're not sleeping as good. And then as well as I do, an 18-year-old getting away from home is not drinking enough water. So you throw all of that on top of them starting a new sport. To me, all of those issues were just as what was driving them to have those problems as it was just starting and practicing and training. Because a lot of those kids train over the summer, but you need to throw all those other lifestyle factors. And I think it's true for anybody. If you're going through something stressful at work, you're going through a breakup, a divorce, whatever life is throwing at you, if it's creating stress and you're not sleeping, then, your exercises and things that you're trying to accomplish, even though exercise is a great solution, you may not be ready to do some of the things that you were doing 2 months ago when your life was all, squared away.
Right. Yeah, that's such a great point. You got to look at definitely the bigger picture in that one. Yeah,
Yeah,
because
and you got to monitor it almost have to monitor it consistently, because things are happening all the time. I mean, today's I feel good. It's a great day. 2 days ago, I traveled. I was gone for a few days. I got home. I didn't sleep that well on the road. So when I got back, I didn't necessarily want to do a hard workout. But today, hey, I feel pretty good. Maybe today I will do something a little hard. And we have to start recognizing that as well.
Great point. I got a question. It may be impossible to ask because everybody is so individual. But have you noticed out of all the years you've been doing this stuff with those 7 movements, a trend towards what most humans struggle with?
No, I mean, that's a great way to ask a question, to be honest, because it's trends. What are the trends that we see over time? And I think we could, generally speaking, we could say mobility is a problem with a lot of older individuals. Shoulder mobility, hip mobility, ankle mobility. And I think a lot of us understand that because, we sit too much. We're just not as active as we need to be. So that's certainly, we get into the movement space, that's something. But something I think we're starting to see, which is interesting, we're starting to see younger individuals be a little bit more hypermobile. When you get to some of the, especially some of the athletes coming in 15, 16, younger athletes, they're mobile, more mobile. And again, this is something that we're seeing. I'm not going to sit there and tell you it's definitive or we're not publishing it, but just kind of, looking at how these younger individuals and looking at what we're seeing is hypermobility seems to be something that we got to keep an eye on. Because I definitely think we got a lack of mobility as we get older. And everybody would say, well, Lee, of course, they're younger kids. Nah, it's something a little bit different that I think we're starting to see, that hypermobility may be something that's we may have to keep an eye on that. But as far as specific trends, yeah, the lack of mobility in your upper back, lack of ankle, lack of hip mobility are all pretty consistent for certain people, certain groups. But when you get into other groups, it's different. Whether it's sports or whether it's, you're looking at a group like the linemen or firefighters, it may be always be a little something different. So you got to keep an eye on it. A good example is a good example I'll say, you got to look for the outliers. And here's what I mean by the outliers. You can see the trends. Like, I know that most people are going to do X, Y, or Z, but I want to see the outliers and see who is really poor. That's what a screen can do for you. So for example, at the university I worked at, I was a strength coach for the volleyball team. Now the volleyball team was female athletes. I had a lucky assignment. So these female athletes, it was only 15 of them. That's what I mean by lucky. It's only 15. So I can handle 15, 20 female athletes. But female athletes, 18, 19, 20 are generally speaking mobile. They got pretty good mobility. That's just the way it is. So I knew as a trend, they all would do well on the mobility test. And the workout that I would design for them would be generally much more stability based. So if they're going to do strength work, I would do one leg, one arm, more strength work. So they're going to do a deadlift, it's one leg, one arm. They're going to do an overhead press, one arm. And sometimes I make them stand on one leg to just focus on stability. So when they come in, so the question I get is, why would I screen them? I know generally how they're going to screen, but I'm looking for those players who are outside of the norm. And I think when we start looking at trends, if I tell you, here's what the trend should be, and now I'm looking to see who's outside that norm. And when I tell people, if you start, even in your own little world, whatever test you do, hopefully you're doing a movement-based test, create your own little trend of your population, and then start seeing where are the outliers? Who are my clients that aren't getting as good as, say, this person? What is going on over here? And I think looking at trends and really not so much just one, create the trend, create kind of that norm, and then where's the outliers, both good and bad? What are the people that are outliers that are good? What are they doing? What are the outliers that are bad? What are they doing? So we can tap into that.
Oh, that's a great point. I love that. Yeah, I'm curious. I mean, do you have anybody that can pass the crawling one?
Well, we did change it up. That's a good one. We change it up. So, we always want a bell curve of results. And most people don't know what you're talking about is you get on your hands and knees, you lift the same side arm and leg, and you try to do the bird dog, right? You try to lift your arm and lift your leg, same side. So it's extremely difficult. And we've been doing that for years. And then we did the more traditional diagonal one, right? So what you're asking is, could anybody do that same side? And we were not getting a lot, but we're getting a few. What we found, though, was not enough people were failing the diagonal part. So nobody was getting ones on our test. So we'd have a few threes, and that's how we do it, 0, 1, 2, 3. So that same side, we're getting a few, but everybody was passing the diagonal one. So what that told us was even though, the distribution wasn't good, but the problem was because everybody was passing that test, we were giving them different or wrong strategies for improvement. So because we weren't getting any ones, which for us, if you get a 2, which is okay, that's okay. We're not going to give you anything to fix that problem. So we were missing all those people who needed to be focused on. So that's really why we changed it. We didn't change it to get more 3s. We changed the test to get more 1s. So now the distribution is a lot better. So when you do a test now, we're going to if you score 1 there now, we'll give you things to fix this problem, which is kind of low threshold core stability. 10 years ago, you would have passed it, you wouldn't have gotten those. So it's, again, how we think. We're always trying to say, how do we make it better? How do we make you better? And if you're not failing something, we're overlooking it.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like, giving a big curve on a test to get everybody to pass the grade. I ain't going to do you any good
That's
when
right.
you get out into the real world. You're going to get your butt kicked when you do that. And it's all about rotation anyway, right? I mean, how many people own rotation? Like zero.
Yeah, exactly. That's
Because
right.
hence, can you even twist and turn around? But that's a really good segue for this question. Uh, you've been doing this a long time with the movement screen, right? That and you see things, you learn, you teach it, you get feedback, all these sorts of things. What are some of the things for you that you've learned or changed or realized, holy crap, I was completely wrong on that, and we changed it up over the years? I know you just mentioned that one of altering it. I'm just curious if you've got a few others that stand out for you, because that's the beauty of a system that evolves.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of mistakes and a lot of things that we've done over the years, and we try to write.
Maybe not with the system itself, but with
Yeah,
your thinking process. You know what I mean?
yeah. I think definitely it's what even practicing what we preach to a degree, not being so boxed in, I think has probably been the biggest thing that I think I've learned. So, for example, early on, we would do the screen and we'd still not so much, focus on the wrong, kind of focus on the wrong thing. Try to bring, a lot of, other people's ideas and other people's into what I'm trying to improve. I'm not making sense here, but so for example, I may say, okay, I'm going to take you through, I'm going to do this, but I may try, hey, I just learned how to do a manipulation on the ankle. So I'm going to go and see if that'll fix it or that'll fix it or that'll fix it. Instead of just, hey, we have pretty good rules here. Like, and the rules are pretty basic. Like, again, the thing is protect you, remove the problem, and not just, keep it simple. And I think
Mm.
early on, for me personally, I was trying to overcomplicate it. And we always want to learn from different people and learn from all these things. I mean, learn from you. I mean, I get on and kind of what's Perry got going on today on Instagram. Go in there and just try to see what's happening and bring that in. But I think we all need to not just follow FMS or follow Stop Chasing Pain or follow whoever and say, okay, how does this fit into my world? And I think earlier in my career, that was probably a mistake I made, is I would learn something and try to just say, okay, I'm going to do that. Right.
Mm.
And not really think, okay, how does this fit into our core beliefs? How does this fit into our principles? How does this fit into what I'm doing, who I'm working with? Because it may fit somewhere, but it may not fit the way I'm trying to make it fit. And
Mm.
trying to make that happen is always a struggle. But I think early on, I was lucky to say, well, if it doesn't work, I'm moving on. Just because it works for somebody else, I can't make it work. It's not working. I'm having some success over here. Put that to the side, and that's great, but it's not great for me. And I think too often we like what people say. And I see it a lot. That's kind of what I'm getting to the feedback for. And people kind of gravitate and say, okay, I love FMS. And that's all they do. Well, that's not necessarily the best thing. There's a lot of other stuff out there. Or,
Mm.
hey, and I think where this came to pass with me is when I went online early on, there was a blog. This was probably 10 years ago. There was a blog said, I hate FMS. Like,
You're doing the right thing then, brother.
and I thought, I'm like, well, I get that you may not like it, but
A little harsh, right?
philosophically, Perry, it's like, hey, if you can't squat with your body weight, you shouldn't load it. That's really all we're doing. That's all we're saying. We could debate all day if the way we test it is right or wrong. That's a debate. But the philosophy is not. And for me, trying to just pull stuff out and seeing how our stuff resonated, but that also resonated with me. I'm like, all right, you know what? It's okay. That's okay. That person feels that way. There's a lot of people out there that feels that way. It doesn't work for them. And same with me. So I think that I'm hoping that made sense. But that's
No,
something
it
that I
did.
still battle with, but definitely came to kind of grips with. It's okay for that to be out there. And that's how we operate.
Yeah, I mean, I love that because I'm the same way over how I've evolved over the years. It's also coming to a point of just, trusting what you've got, continuously learning, right? And then taking in that feedback from others, removing your ego from the equation. But I found that that's also one of the things that early on I did when I started to learn the FMS. I got to a point where I started to just overthink and overcomplicate it. And that's why I love the way that you were continuously teaching it, is just to go back to those fundamentals and basics, because that'll always be your sandbar, your anchor in a way. And if you can, I think I read somewhere else that how well you master the basics and fundamentals influences how well you learn everything else after that.
Yeah, but I
And
think
for
I
you
just saw a
guys,
quote.
yeah.
I think I just saw a quote. I don't know who said it, but it was about black belts, and being a black belt, just being able to be a master at the basics. And I think
Yeah.
that's what's true. And I think that was a struggle I had. And that's a great question you asked me. You articulated kind of what I was trying to say in that long-winded statement was, I kind of got away from my own fundamentals and was just, because I was out there teaching and hearing all these people, all their great ideas. I'm like, man, that's awesome. Go back and try it and just get frustrated. I'm like, you know what? Let me see how it fits instead of trying to wedge it in.
Yeah, I find that a lot in the world, at least in our world. People have so many techniques, styles, tools, courses, and they go to all these things, right? But then it's almost so much overload that they're immobilized. They don't even know whether to go left or right. They're just, it's overwhelmed, and it actually stops the learning process. It's like taking so many things, opening up a closet door and throwing it in there, but there's no organization to it. It's just like boom.
That's exactly right. Especially now when education is so easy to come by.
Right. Yeah. Plus, what'll happen is that I'm doing everything here, and then I take a workshop, and then all you see from them on that person on social media is the new thing they learned at the workshop, but everything else they knew was wrong. No.
Exactly. So all the success you've been having over the years, probably not that great. Now that you've got this little tool, now that's what's going to make everything great now again. And you were doing okay before that.
Yeah. And I love what you said before. I say this line all the time. Everything works for someone. It just might not be what is going to be working for you or for that person in this moment. And you just move to the next one, and then move to the next one.
And that's why you need feedback. Your feedback, always throw whatever you're doing against your standard or your baseline to see if it helps. If it doesn't help or doesn't give you the right outcomes, then move on. Again, it's fail fast. Figure out if what you're doing is working. If it's not your fault. It's not their fault. You just got to figure out what you can do to help them out.
I got another question for you. I know we're running a little bit long, but I'm having so much fun here. How did things change for you in the way you were teaching, the way that may have helped you change things up in relationship to the system, maybe even for the better, honestly, when the zombie apocalypse, COVID-19 hit, and you had to change the model of the way you educate?
Yeah, it was, we were lucky because we had online education. And this is a kind of again, I'm gonna try to make this quick, but Gray and I made a very, we decided in 2011 we were going to try to figure out a way to do online education. Now there's also, we were doing education through the VHS tapes back in the late 90s, but online education was starting to be something. So, and we did it. And people are going to laugh at me when I say this, and I'll also say that it's definitely financially been a great benefit of having online education. But when we were starting to become popular, Perry, back when you and I started working together, FMS was becoming popular and people were just teaching it all over the place. And even we started having people teach it for us because it was becoming, demand. It was demand. I mean, people wanted it. And Gray and I, like, you know what? The further away from us it gets, the worse the message will get. Even though I'm doing everything I can to train up our instructors or whatever, the further away from us, the message is going to get lost. So we're like, you know what? Everybody that takes one of our classes gets the online education. So if you go and you take a class from whoever, you're going to hear Gray and Lee teach the class online. So we've been doing that since 2010, and we did that for that reason. And again, we obviously want to make some money, so it was a good business move. But so we've been doing the online education for a while. And when the pandemic hit, we had to, we kind of knew that our live education was going out the window. but we were, again, fortunate that we had already had that established, and we had a place that we could get upstairs and do live and bring models in. We got a little studio, and we just started, doing live webinars, live YouTube lives, just trying to do whatever we could to just get people. And I think, to me, it was the live stuff that I felt was, because again, online education is recorded. You can say, if you don't like what you said, Perry, you can stop it and say it again a different way, and you don't get. But when you go live, just like we are now, we're just kind of riffing. To me, that's what actually helped me, even more, standing in front of a camera, talking to a lot, knowing there's people on the other side of this camera that are listening to me. One, the jokes aren't the same, and you got to be a little bit more, and you don't know whether they're leaning in or not. So you gotta be a little bit more engaging, maybe in a different way. So, it's much more difficult to do the live webinars, the live YouTubes, where all you see is a camera in front of you, that you don't get that interaction. So it's a little bit tougher. I don't know if I'm quite answering your question, but I think just learning that much more direct. Like, you don't have to, people are sitting there listening, that you're going to give them the bullet, and you're not going to give them all the different stories and all the other stuff. So yeah, it's definitely, we were fortunate because we did have a studio. We were already set up to go virtual. Maybe that's the best way to answer that question.
Yeah, no, you did great on that. And you do most of your filming and your broadcasting from the FMS headquarters now, right?
Yeah. We're in a small little town in Chatham, Virginia. Basically, Perry, where you were, your audience may know that you're from not far away from where we are. And yeah, we got a studio, and we can basically broadcast out wherever we want. And we do virtual courses online, and live webinars and stuff that, at least once a month, once every quarter.
Do you do any on-site training for individuals that come there to work with you, or is it just the filming?
Yeah, we don't do as much as we did. We were doing a lot a few years ago. Now we're just kind of cut back on. I think a lot of that's still due to the pandemic. So yeah, we definitely have people that will come in. Typically, they're kind of pro athletes, some of the military people, and some people that are within driving distance. So yeah, we have a clinic next door that we'll see people rolling in, but we definitely don't do that as much as we used to.
Are you and Gray going to be teaching the courses anymore in the coming years, or?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. One thing Gray and I are doing, because we've been working on some stuff the last number of years, kind of like we talked about today, just that holistic approach about looking at all these other factors that impact movement. And we've been working on some tools and some things that can help look at all those things and how they impact movement. So Gray and I are going to be getting out on the road in 2023. Perry, we're going to start, that's where Gray and I started. We started, him and I, going around the country and teaching seminars. Him and I have not done that in probably 10 years together. We do it separately. We're always out teaching and whatnot. But him and I are going to go out start next year and get around the country and teach 4 or 5 seminars.
Oh my goodness, that's the rock stars together again.
Easy now. We're old men now. We're not the cool guys anymore.
Oh my God, you are to me. I'm like the biggest groupie ever. When you guys come around anywhere up on near the Northeast.
Oh yeah, you're going to be so there. You're going to be there hanging out with us, no question.
Absolutely. Well, I really love, man, all of your education that you put out there, and it's just so much of it. I really enjoy your movement podcast. I mean, I was grateful and honored to be a guest on there recently. It was so much fun, but that's got to be something that's evolved quite nicely for you, right? I mean, that's I see those videos on YouTube all the time.
Yeah, when you talk about the pandemic, that was probably the one thing out of the pandemic that came out of the pandemic that was positive for us. Is, if you've heard Gray, and I'm not necessarily, you have Gray Cook talk. He's a great speaker. He's a great philosopher.
So are you, man. So are you.
Well, but he's definitely at a level that's pretty cool listening to him. So I've been wanting, to be honest with you, I've been trying. I said, dude, you are perfect for a podcast. He said, I said, great. You just stick a microphone in front of Gray. He's going to start talking. So yeah. I knew it was great for a podcast, but I also knew that if we do this, I had to be there to give him, kind of like you're doing today, Perry, throw a question out, answer it. So I had to be that guy. So with the pandemic, obviously we're stuck. We're not going anywhere. We got our little studio up, so we decided to do our podcast, and it has been cool. It has been pretty neat. To you're a prime example. Reach out to people we haven't spoken to in a while, knowing that they're in the same boat we are. They're not out traveling as much as they have been. Easier getting a hold of people, and just throwing around topics and doing stuff like we did today has been awesome, because like I said, for me, we've been able to connect with people we haven't connected with. We've been able to bring people on that are not necessarily in our world, but they're experts in their world. We've had some nutritionists on, we've had some people on, biomechanists on that really bring a unique kind of look at things. We had our dads on. We did a Father's Day thing that was pretty cool for us. So yeah, just little things like that. So the podcast is probably the most positive thing. All the negative stuff coming out of the pandemic, but that for us was pretty positive. So I definitely invite people to check that out.
Oh my goodness, I can't believe I haven't seen that father one. I gotta
Yeah,
check that one
was
out.
we did that one of the first, maybe the first season. When we were just trying to figure things out a little bit, trying to make our way. It was, we get the dads on for Father's Day, and they can tell the stories about the boys.
Oh, that's great. That's great. So, anything else you got coming out besides the teaching together, possibly in 2023? What's on your
Yeah, I
radar?
mean, definitely be on the lookout. We've got we call it a musculoskeletal health kind of platform where I talked about looking at all those things, looking at breathing, looking at your nutrition, your sleep, your behavioral health, combining that with your movements. That's what we've been working on. It's really just a neat little platform. It's an app. It's online. We're going to be promoting and pushing that out as a way to just gauge your overall musculoskeletal health and figure out where you need to focus. Maybe it's movement, maybe it's not, but that's going to be pushed out first quarter of 2023. So definitely circle back here when we get that ready to roll out. It's going to be something pretty neat. It's been in the works for years and years. We've had it kind of out there, and now it finally come to fruition.
Oh, we'll definitely get you on the show for that. For everybody listening, I was kind of a test run on that, the app, and it's fantastic. It's wonderful. You're really going to love it. So we'll definitely have you on the show. So we're going to wrap it up, but I usually try to ask people that are on the show, like some takeaways that they would like to share with the audience listening. And it can be about anything. I mean, there's stuff that's important to you, stuff that you'd like to share when people ask you, if you have some time to say, okay, these things are really important in the message that I'm trying to get out there and the things that I believe. Can you share a couple of those with our audience on big takeaways for you?
Obviously, Perry, we're talking about movement, and there's going to be some limitations in your movement. There's some ways you can, check your balance. But I think the one takeaway for me now, knowing and talking and doing the things we've been doing over the years, is keep it simple. Drink plenty of water during the day, try to get as much sleep you can at night, meditate, do the basics. I mean, take a walk. I think in our world that we're in fitness and health, with all the data and information we got thrown at us, it's hard to overcomplicate it. And if you can just be active, don't drink as much caffeine, drink more water, try to get some sleep at night. If you're stressed out, take a walk and try to meditate, turn off your devices. As simple as that sounds, it works. I mean, the simple stuff works. I mean, you and I both can give somebody a crazy ass workout, but you know what? Just relax. And, if you're active, you get your heart rate up every day. I think, one thing that I thought was really cool, and I think it was, oh gosh, I'm going to mess the name. It's, it's Matt. Oh gosh, he's an actor. And, he lives in Texas. Oh gosh, I can't think of his name. Anyway, he made this statement. He said, hey, you want to sweat every day. Just sweat every day. And again, you don't have to necessarily sweat every day, but just get your heart rate up every day. So that's probably the takeaway for me now. We can overcomplicate it. I can do whatever, but sometimes it simple works. Not sometimes, it works.
Yeah, kind of like move well, move often.
There you go. Move well, move often.
One. I think it's on the back of my shirt. That's a good one. And that's what we tell people, is just move more of yourself, more often, more ways, more environments. Just get out there, play. And the operative word there is move.
Exactly. Just get up and move around a little bit. Get the heart rate up.
Exactly. Dude, thank you so much for coming on the show. It was such a blast and an honor to have you here.
Nah, Perry, thank you so much. You've been a great friend, a great mentor. Now, like I said, I follow you. So it's been awesome watching your progress as well. So really appreciate you having me on.
You got it. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Much love. We'll see you next time on the Stop Chasing Pain podcast.